A little different. Here we are.
Hello. Hello. I've seen
Hello,
some people already here.
They are.
Welcome.
They
Shall
are
I
coming
jump
in.
straight into this do the disclaimer before we get any further on?
Julie,
Right.
brace yourself for the disclaimer.
Gird your loins. Welcome. This is History After Dark. We called it that because it's nighttime now, and also because we like to talk about history, impart the facts as far as they are known, and do so while engaging in some smut, in some innuendo, innuendo, a few four-letter expletives. With that being said, if you happen to be in an open plan office, put a headphone in. This is how your judgmental boss writes you up. If you are in a car, kitchen, living room with a small child, we call this child Timmy because Timmy is a problem. Timmy's the sort of child that hears one vulgar thing one time, locks it away in his mind palace, takes it into school with him. He then has a teacher. In my head, this teacher is Miss Honey from Matilda. He tells Miss Honey this. Now, Miss Honey does not watch History After Dark, so she doesn't know the first cardinal rule of History After Dark, which is if you don't know what it means, it's not for you. Don't Google it. So Miss Honey Googles this vulgar thing, and she is, of course, now corrupted and disturbed. So then you get called up to school, and you've got to explain why Miss Honey's crying in a corner and now needs 12 weeks of therapy that you're going to help to fund, and also why Timmy knows the thing he knows. It's awkward for everybody. Put a headphone in. With that being said, you can also, if you can't put a headphone in, watch us on the playback. It is, however, always worth watching us live because on occasions, once so far, we might say something that is so unspeakably depraved, so borderline illicit and illegal that we have to yeet this footage into the sun for all of us to stay out of prison. So it's always worth watching us live. As I said, we do have some rules. We've talked about the first one, but is don't Google it. We hope that all of you here are adults, please. So with that being said, you, of course, can make your own choices. We do not, however, endorse this being a drinking game. It's not a drinking game. This will never be legal or medical advice. Please don't sue us. And last but by no means least, with this disclaimer in mind, where I've made it very clear what is going to happen, if at any point someone puts in the comments, oh, it's very clever, but I don't like how you swear, we know what you're doing, and we know that your kink is to be shamed, and kinks are fine, but kinks without consent are not allowed. Welcome to Had. Welcome back, Julian. This is the Thunder.
Hello.
It's been a while.
I'm devastated that I didn't put a little bio underneath my name.
It's not too late.
I should have put leading King John fan or
yeah, you're a King John fan.
Josephine fancier, I think perhaps Josephine fancier.
Bearing in mind,
yes, I have a soft spot for Napoleon, actually, which is a bog in the New Forest. But as for as portrayed by Vanessa Kirby, anyway,
Well, she's a lovely woman, Vanessa Kirby.
This is kind of leading us into what Julie is going to talk with us about today, because the topic overall is going to be what makes good and bad. What are good and bad choices for making historical dramas or maybe even non-fiction? But this is being inspired by the fact that Julian has been to see the new film Napoleon, and on the whole, I think it's only fair to say, despite the fact that I haven't seen it, that it's gone down like 85 lead balloons.
So that's a very specific amount.
So bad that a German pop singer has written a song about it.
Really?
I've lead balloons. So there's an 80s throwback moment.
Yeah, I know. You know my age, don't you? Yeah.
So if you have seen this film or you have any questions about this film, do please pop opinions/questions in the comments, and we will address as many of these as we can. But you may also find, as I'm sure we will, this is inspiration to talk about other things that we have seen that have worked well, have worked less well, have been awful, have been superb. And let's have your thoughts and feelings and opinions on what makes good history television. Good, bad, fiction, non-fiction, whatever you like. Julian, tell us a little bit about yourself first, though, just in case people don't know who you are and what you do and how you do it.
Me? Well, I do a bit of a number of things. So I've just finished dialing a script for Al Murray. That's what I've been doing this week. And this is where we are. Al Murray, for those that don't know, is a
Oh,
sort
wow.
of TV, a bit British comic, but he's a pretty good historian as well. And I've written a script for him he's going to take people around a museum in England. So watch the space for that. It points out the things that he finds interesting, but they're the things that I find interesting because I wrote it.
So you wrote it.
And then on Monday, I do a lot of battlefield stuff, and I've just done a podcast for BBC Countryfile with them on the Battle of Lansdowne, which was an English Civil War battle. But they're brilliant. They've decided not to call it a podcast because it's a walk. They're going to call it a plodcast. That's what we pay our. That's what we pay our license fee for. That kind of wit.
Yes.
Incredible.
I don't know. You could make it up, could you? You know. But that was bloody cold. Actually. Bloody cold. Yeah, it was freezing. But the only good thing was that it was near to the park and ride for the Bath Christmas market.
Well, that was
And
very
I don't
kind.
think. And Christmas hasn't started, has it? Until you stood in the rain, sipping a lukewarm mulled wine out of a polystyrene cup, looking at things that people have made out of wood and candles. So I did that for a while, and then I went out with my son, and that was better. Yeah. So it's been a busy old week, really, to be honest. With the but you know, most of my week has been dominated by trying to get beyond chapter 1 of Philippa Langley's book on the Princes in the Tower, and watching watching Napoleon and mulling over the film Napoleon.
It's been a landmark historical week for you.
But Napoleon was. If you haven't seen it, you've got to see it because again, I think some people may know this. There's a play that hangs on in the West End for ages. It's called The Play That Goes Wrong, and it's just a shambles, and it's quite entertaining shambles. Well, that's how I saw Napoleon. But historically and dramatically, it was shite. But the cinematography was, you know what he's like, Ridley Scott. You know, you could pause it at any stage, and it could be some kind of romantic painting by David, who features in the film actually. So that's good. But you know, there's so many crazy errors which I could kind of forgive them in a way if the sort of plot was a bit more exciting, and I couldn't believe that I'm watching Napoleon and 25 years and I was thinking it actually I wonder what's on the other side, but there isn't because I'm in the cinema. But fantastic locations, and you can go location spotting, and I knew at one stage that they were filming in Blenheim Palace because they didn't take down the Duke of Marlborough's standard. You could see it in the background, and then they were down at Petworth, and I'm sure I saw Henry VIII in the background at one stage. I'm sure I did, and they're at Malta, and then a remarkable scene for the Battle of Waterloo, where I think they must have got the set for All Quiet on the Western Front on the cheap. Because the British Army, the British soldiers at Waterloo, red coats and squares, they're in trenches. They're in the trenches, which I think most people would be aware that the Napoleonic Wars wasn't trench warfare. It's certainly not the Battle of Waterloo. But I'm going off on one about Joachim Phoenix. He had two sorts of styles in it, really. He had sullen and petulant. They were his two, he did a very good sullen and a very good petulant. So he was quite insanely. The trouble is, isn't it, that it's 25 years of somebody's life that you've got to squeeze into. Christ knows what the director's cut is going to be like. I think it's definitely going to be bring your sandwiches in a sleeping bag because it's going to go on forever, isn't it? The director's cut. But, to try and do that in 2.5 hours, it's always going to be a problem, isn't it? And of course, it's the same guy. So when he starts, it starts with an inaccurate depiction of the execution of Marie Antoinette. And I knew there was going to be trouble. It's one of those films, I think actually it might have been a homage to Waterloo, because those films where it starts with feet going along a corridor, and you know what it is, and then it went off to be executed. But I think it's well known that she had her hair chopped off, because you don't want that getting in the way of the falling blade. And it create a style at that time that people were wearing shorter hair, and it was a sort of reference through the guillotine. But Marie Antoinette doesn't. She has lots of grey hair in it, so I thought, hello. And then, of course, there's Napoleon watching in it. He's watching all of this going on. So, but this is a Napoleon, 17? When was she executed? I don't know, 1793, something like that. I don't know. So Napoleon is going to be in his mid-20s, but it's Joaquin Phoenix, and it's still Joaquin Phoenix at the end. And they made a few bits on, but he hasn't aged. and Josephine, she's hot. She is hot. And when I saw that it said there were scenes of a sexual nature, I was quite excited. Actually, I thought, normally I bring my tissues along to cry, but I thought on this occasion they made another use. But actually, as it came to it just didn't quite work. That she's too young. For Napoleon. But on the other hand, I suppose you're seeing her through Napoleon's eyes. And he would have fancied her, So you've got this figure who's very beautiful, but he was too young for Napoleon. But he came up with some of the great lines of cinema. Forget, here's Johnny. You've now got destiny gave me this lamb chop. Which
No, shut up.
Was one of the lines.
Sorry, what?
Destiny gave me this lamb chop.
That's an actual line.
Yes.
Unpack that for me. And yeah. Well, it was he's sitting around a table and he's talking about destiny in a rather ham-fisted way, and he talks about where he is. Or a lamb-fisted way.
Destiny, but it's character. God, yes, exactly. It was so that was quite interesting, and. The battles were, you must have spent a fortune on these bloody things, honestly. Lots of extras, and the uniforms. Obviously he's almost. There's an obsessive accuracy in the uniforms. So, for example, this is me being a total anorak. These things matter to me. But Napoleon had these guards, and they had big bear skins. The Imperial Guard. This was their standard sort of look with these bear skins. And they started as the consular guards when he was consul. And when they were the consular guard, on the back of the bearskin, they had like a little red patch with a white cross on it. When he became emperor, that little red patch, instead of a cross, it had a grenade on the back of it. Minor point that nobody's going to care about. But Ridley Scott did. So in the film, he's gone to that kind of detail. But he doesn't bother to get the basic information right, So... Yeah, but it should have been called Napoleon and Josephine, I think, and I would have cut the battle scenes and had a bit more love interest in it myself. But that's me. So, for example, he leaves Egypt because Josephine's having an affair. No mention of the fact that his fleet's been destroyed at the Battle of the Nile. And they're stranded there. And he leaves Elba because he misses Josephine. She's dead in reality. So he comes back from Elba, not because he wants to start the empire up again, and help France. He just wants to get his hands on Josephine again, which is shown. Him showing, it is shown him getting his hands on Josephine in the play, in the film. It's not an easy watch, actually. I watched it. I thought, for Christ's sake, I hope I'm not like that in the sack. To be honest, it's he's not. What he comes across as actually is, those Rowlandson cartoons of this sort of laughable little figure that Rowlandson and Gilray put in their cartoons at the time, sort of to mock him. That's the Napoleon that you get really in it. So it is quite funny in some ways, but the accuracy, he opens fire on the pyramids. Yeah, I never quite worked out why he opened fire on the pyramids, but he did with his guns. So that was good. And there was another good line where he said, "The English think they are so special because they have boats."
Well, that's true. We do.
Yeah, a lot of people on Tinterweb said, it should be ships, but actually, it's the sort of thing that Napoleon would have said. He wouldn't have said ships. He would have said boats. But beautiful, beautiful scenes. Yeah. So a beautiful film to look at. Bit long, and the history is ridiculous, and so many flags. So many flags. I don't quite know how they managed to fight, because when the soldiers are coming onto the battlefield, there's just hundreds of tricolours. So open fire. Well, I can't. I've got this flag.
I can't see past the flag.
Yeah. So it's a shambles, but I did enjoy it in a sort of, like you would slow down. I'm sure you wouldn't, but I do. To slow down to see a badger that's been run over by the side of the road, or a car accident or something. It was. I watched it with that kind of feel in me, really.
You rubbernecked
So
it.
there we are. So do go. I think, and also then you'll get interested, and you can come on my tour of Waterloo that I do.
Yeah.
Just throw that in there.
I've got to say,
Yeah,
you've
of
done a much
course.
better
Of
job
course.
of selling your tour of Waterloo.
Reality.
You've done a much better job of selling your tour of Waterloo than selling the film. I mean, I feel like
No, you got to go, because it's hilarious. It's hilarious, this film, but it's not good history, and I'm not convinced it was very good drama either myself. They did their best with the script. I think I can forgive to a certain extent. But what's my favourite historical film is A Knight's Tale. And you know what I mean. And historically, it's a joke, but it doesn't pretend to be anything else, does it? And it's good fun.
Yeah.
And I sort of think it gets to the heart of certain aspects of medieval to a certain extent. A little bit, tiny little bit. Whereas I don't think that this did that, in my opinion. So there we are. It's funny, and the settings are lovely, and for that alone, I would go. But I'm going back. I am going back. To watch it again.
Glutton for punishment.
So that will be Lost King and 2 Napoleons.
Lost King and 2 Napoleons. I don't go.
Sounds like a film, doesn't it?
That's what I mean.
Will you just let me know what you're planning to see at the cinema in the future? Because you are the albatross of films. So I just want to know what you're planning to see, because clearly it's going to be absolute tripe.
Actually, I watched a TV film last week, Violent Night. And I heartily recommend that. Violent Night.
Violent Night.
And it's a cross between Home Alone and Die Hard. Only
Christmas,
the Bruce Willis figure is Father Christmas.
Oh.
And essentially this fact that these people are holding this family hostage, and Father Christmas comes down the chimney, and he basically slaughters them all in all kinds of violent ways. But that's out now. That's well worth watching. I loved it, actually. So all those things you remember in all those crazy things that happened in Home Alone, like the bowling ball bounces down, or he treads on a nail, or
a mere warm up.
All that, yeah. That happens in Violent Night, except the people are killed by them. So loved it.
Paige says Julian needs to start.
I'll shut up for a while now. I've shut up, but I've got to calm down after thinking about Napoleon. What a mad film that was.
So even if it's not your period of history, you're not going to enjoy it because the drama wasn't that great either. Did the story knit together at all?
Nah, I didn't think it did. I thought it, because it's such a long period of time, isn't it? You're trying to do 25 years. So, or are we talking about Violent Night now? That's story, and that knitted together. That Violent Night had a better storyline, actually, about a family coming together. I preferred that storyline to L'Empereur.
Together.
Like I quite enjoyed Versailles when that was on, because it just wasn't something I was particularly knowledgeable on, so I could just enjoy it.
Well, yeah.
But because it was good drama and it looked amazing.
Yeah, the visuals were great. I think the thing is, that's with Ridley Scott. I mean, I've only seen stills and I've seen the trailer, and as with lots of Ridley Scott movies, it does look like it's been filmed through a sock. It's all very kind of grayscale, but there is, with his, for somebody who makes so many things set in history and clearly has a passion for, as you said, accuracy in costumes, he seems to really hate historians and have absolutely no respect for their work. My understanding is that the expert he had for Napoleon is not a historian, he is ex-military. So
Absolutely.
I don't think, is that correct?
Basically, yeah, it is true, and I think you're absolutely right. He says, leaning on a copy of The Princes in the Tower at the moment. But yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And you know, he, instead of sort of saying, I would have said something along the lines of, this is a kind of adventure historical movie, blah blah. You know, I'm not going for accuracy here. We're trying to give, but he kind of doubled down on it, and he said, well, how do people know they weren't there? And he didn't use a historical advisor, but he used an advisor, as you rightly say, for the costumes, and the settings were right. So it does seem that he, for some reason, maybe he had a bad experience when he did Duelists all those years ago, his other Napoleonic film, which is if anybody's not seen that, I think that's a superb film. But he's dealing there with the micro rather than the macro. It's two characters in the Napoleonic Wars, and it goes through not a man and a woman, two men that fight duels, and it goes through the story, and a lot of it is about, you know, what leads people to go to war, in a way that it shows through these two people, and I think that's a far better film, to be honest, because he didn't try and show the history as such. He placed these people within a historical context. But I'm sure you're right. He does seem to have a complete disregard or dislike of historians, which he doesn't have for other things, does he?
It seems to come across. I've only sort of seen the commentary, but almost he's like in contempt. He's like poked the bear, like he's like, right, have this.
It feels like what he's done is gone, well, obviously he can't be a stupid man. He understands that the people who are going to go and watch this movie, it's not going to be people who exclusively go and watch Marvel films. They're going to have an interest in history. Presumably, most of them are going to have an interest in historical accuracy to at least some point. Many of them, his audience, many of them would be historians of whatever period. It feels like maybe he's decided to kind of go that they should get a life because it's inaccurate, because he wants to rage bait. Is he like, there was the strike on, there was a SAG-AFTRA strike, we couldn't do promotion, the quickest way to get bums on seats is to rage bait. If I make historians angry, they'll come and watch the film so they can slag it off, and all publicity is good publicity.
Yeah.
Because it's so baffling to me that he would just shit talk historians when he's made a historical movie about a really it's not like he's talking about the Tudors or the Victorians. Napoleon is a more niche historical interest. It's not as mainstream as the other kind of gateway drugs into history.
I agree, but in a way, I think if you see it as those Rowlandson cartoons that I'm banging on about. There's one of John Bull and Napoleon carving up a globe, which is like a plum pudding.
Yeah.
And John Bull gets the sea and Napoleon gets the land. And Napoleon's this sort of comic little character. And then you've got one of him being kicked out or tossed out of Spain by a Spanish bull, and all these sort of things. And in a way, it's something like that, I think. You almost have to look at it as a sort of cartoon almost. But why double down and try to defend the history of it? I have no idea. And there was some of it he could have got it right very easily, but I think he chose not to. So, for example, you get the retreat from Moscow. So 1812, Napoleon invades over to Russia. The Russians burn their own capital. His army's sick already, and it's on the way back, and it's destroyed. And in the film, he then is forced into exile. So you've lost all of your army. You must go into exile to Elba. But the fact you fought on for 2 years, and there was that didn't come into it. And they could easily have said, 2 years later on the screen or something like that. He chose not to. And interesting, the very last thing in it, and he wouldn't have done this without meaning to, being serious. At the very end of it, he's on St. Helena, and there's two sort of daughters of the garrison, and he's talking to them. He said, and then I burnt Moscow. And they say, I thought that the Russians burnt it themselves, And he said, well, what gives you that idea? Well, it's common knowledge. And that kind of is the end of the film almost, So there's a little dig there, I think, about historical accuracy in a way, and he's sort of saying, so perhaps, he doesn't care, he's being like Napoleon. But you've got to see it. You've got to see it. And to see Napoleon, whenever he wants to get it on with Josephine, crawling across the floor, grunting like a pig. God knows what the French must think about this. Perfidious Albion have made another film, quite extraordinary, really.
I'm sure most
That's
of
the
us
kind of thing to take your teenage children to, isn't it? To embarrass them,
Also, might prevent teenage pregnancies.
Well, it might. Yeah. Well, if you had somebody grunting like a pig, I think it would put a stop to everything, wouldn't it?
Pretty Pick makes a good point, similar to what you were saying. She said there's also this vibe I've noticed in culture where historians are treated like annoying fuss budgets who just want to ruin everyone's fun. Just because we want it to be right. How dare we?
Look,
I don't think
I've worked with actors as a historical advisor, and also I've worked with them as a text director for Shakespeare. And I will be honest, they come to those sessions and they come really cagey, because I do think that it is 6 of one and half dozen of the other. And I think we can perhaps start to move this into what makes good historical fiction. And part of that is having the right advisor, because actually it's a horrible phrase, but machines talk to machines. And not to like toot my own horn, but having been a performer, having been an actor, I understand that I can give you this historical basis, but I can't be precious about it, because sometimes actually the performance requires you to take one interpretation and perhaps disregard another. I will give you the information and I will give it to you in a way that you can use it as an actor. When actors come to me and they are like, okay, I've got half an hour, and they're cross arms, I know they've met somebody who's taken out their notes and given them a 30-minute lecture on how this part should be played. That's not what a historical advisor does. The historical advisor is part of the creative team. And if you can't function creatively, if you can't think creatively, then you're no good to man or beast. And so I think that there are people who set out their stall as historical advisors, who go in and speak to directors, assistant directors, producers, actors in ways that is so unhelpful that when the next film comes along, they aren't asked, and nobody else is either.
No, I think that's very so that's why I'm wondering whether Ridley Scott at some stage got a bad experience. It makes you think. And there are dramatic devices in films that you've got to accept. And a good example in this film is that at the end, Wellington meets Napoleon, and Wellington explains to Napoleon, and obviously to us, what's going to happen to Napoleon, because Napoleon thinks he's going to get a house in the Cotswolds. Seriously, he thought he's going to get a house in the Cotswolds. But of course, the English are never going to have Napoleon living in the Cotswolds. It's just not going to happen. So you go to St. Helena, and then it has to explain what St. Helena is. So that's a dramatic device, and it works within the context of the film. And I think that's quite acceptable, And there's that for that film where Elizabeth meets Mary Queen of Scots. For that film, I think that it didn't happen as far as we know. Nobody must know that we met. But for the context of the film to drive the point, it's all right, isn't it? But I know I did quite a bit for Hollow Crown, and they wanted to know about armor and the rest of it. And you're going to have to accept that the only people in the middle of a battle that's got no head protection are the leading actors, because people need to see them and see what they're doing. Whereas in reality, of course, that would never happen, would it? And you're going to have to accept in films that people, again, this is from this sort of historical point of view, that they are going to hang on to their arrows, preferably burning arrows, for ages, looking down the line, waiting for Thomas Erpingham, whoever it is, to say shoot, because it builds up the dramatic. It's the dramatic device, isn't it? If you actually didn't do that, it's not going to work. So you've got to cut some slack. But going back to this film, I think the problem was that the drama wasn't very good either.
But
what about you? What are your? I've gone on and on about my Napoleon. What do you have a love and a hate as a film?
Well, I was going to say, have you? Because I know Kat and Philippa are going to go, oh. Braveheart, Julian. Have you seen Braveheart, and what did you make of that?
Great film, terrible history. If only it was set. If only it was set. You know, like if only it was set sort of in some kind of Game of Thrones place. You know, then I think it would have been quite a bit of fun. You know, and obviously I would have liked the execution scene to last a bit longer. That I thought they're a bit short on that. It could have been a bit more of that, more detail. I think, not really. But you know, that's what I thought about it. But as a film, as a sort of drama, it was great. You know, and you know, there's some wonderful moments that never happened, wasn't there? Like when Edward I took Piers Gaveston. Was it? I don't know who you're supposed to be, but Edward's his son's advisor, and took him to the window and said, "Oh," and then just chucked him out the window. It was a great moment, wasn't it? You know, as a drama, it was brilliant. But not as a history, not for me.
So, but it had the drama element, so at least it had that. And
that's right. That's how I see it. Yeah,
lacked that. Okay.
Yeah, and Gladiator. You know, Gladiator's plays very fast and loose with the, doesn't it? But a great film again, in my opinion. You know.
I tell you,
there was a film, Richard III. There's Richard III. That film by Shakespeare's Richard. That's interesting, isn't it?
Okay, come on then.
Which version of Shakespeare's Richard III?
I just thought I don't think I've mentioned The Princes in the Tower, new book.
Okay, right. This is like not very elephant in the room. Let's talk about The Lost King, and we'll lead in that way, because
you told me that we don't want to talk about it. You've got better people to talk about The Lost King, to whom it matters. So you know, people like Matt Lewis and Nathan. It's important to them.
I think what you said,
Julian, buttons on the side of the stage, you know, to their ugly sisters. So I don't have any. It
was a nice story. It was sort of. I think you said to me that there were issues with it, but it was quite enjoyable as a film. It was a little bit sort of twee and pleasant.
What are we talking about? Which film?
Not The Lost King. You said it was.
Oh God, no, I hate The Lost King. I hate it with a passion.
It was kind of. You said if you took it like in terms of the storyline and the people that were omitted and some of the way people were represented, it was awful. But in terms of it, if people just took it as a film, it sort of had a slight twee enjoyability about it and some nice acting, I think was what you said to me at the time.
I don't think he remembers that, Catherine, for the look on his face.
Stick in my mouth, actually.
On his face, I'm going to say that's not quite.
I mean, what I will say, what I'm going to flag up here is that The Lost King is not historical fiction. The Lost King is not historical fiction. Although it features historical characters, it's not historical fiction.
No, it isn't. No,
but it's not that.
Yeah, but there is a bit of historical fiction in it where Richard III is made out to be some kind of good guy, as opposed to the.
Say what?
No. No, I didn't. Because I know the people involved in The Lost King, and they're thoroughly decent people who did so much, you know. And let's face it, whenever we think about who found the Princes in the Tower, not the Princes in the Tower, who found the remains of Richard III, and who identified, we don't think of Turi King and all of her hard work, do we? We don't think about that, or we don't think about, you know, Richard Buckley and his expertise. We think of Philippa. So actually, she's done all right. I think that Philippa's got plenty of credit out of it. And every time I've heard her talk about it by any of those guys at the or girls at the at University of Leicester, they always give her plenty of credit. And so it was a bit of a shame, I think, that you're basically making living people that have still got a career to be acting in a selfish and to a certain extent unprofessional way. You know, if somebody's 300 years dead, I think you can probably do it, as long as it's not Richard III, of course, who we must not do that with, you know. But everybody else we can do it with. So you know, that's why I wasn't that keen. I came away, and somebody said it. You know, it's a sort of sweet film, and actually, it left a very bitter taste in my mouth, really, when I thought about it. I'm very open tonight, aren't I? I haven't held back. That's the end of my career on History After Dark, isn't it?
No, I completely agree with you. I think that that fiction is all well and good, but when it's used to denigrate and call into disrepute living people, I think it's despicable. And I think that what offended me about Ridley Scott's comments on historians, and actually it's the same thing that offended me about The Lost King, is that I understand that the Academy can be an ivory tower. I understand that there is a narrative of people who come from that being like fun sponges, but there has been a rise in popular histories. There have been a few books that have come out that have insinuated that members of the Academy are deliberately gatekeeping truth for some reason, that there's some kind of widespread conspiracy. And I believe that, and I find that so incredibly offensive and degrading and demeaning, and it makes me so cross. It makes me so cross.
Oh, I think it's the country's had enough of experts, isn't it? It's this whole thing.
Yeah,
and it goes beyond history. It goes to all kinds of things, you know. And so, you know, I and sometimes people have got you know, they asked me about a little bit about this when I was doing the walk for the BBC Country File. You know, do you have problems with that with amateur history? I said, no, we don't, because without amateur history, so much work has been carried out. So much of what we know is thanks to amateur historians. So much of, you know, that what we know about battlefields is amateur historians. So no, but we shouldn't denigrate the work of professional historians. So I can't. Well, you said that more articulately than I did, but I agree. You know, it seems to be that you know, there's a little bit of it in this whole thing about the discovery of the princes in the tower, isn't there? You know, a little bit of it, a lot of it, a huge amount of it, maybe.
But so talking, you did mention, Julian, you asked us what kind of historical fiction we think works, and when you said that, two things sprung to mind, and the reason why, and for different reasons. When I am doing education sessions, there are two historical fictions, one more loosely historical fiction than the other, that I refer to time and time again. One is Game of Thrones, because that line that Cersei says, in the Game of Thrones, you win or you die, is just, when you're teaching Wars of the Roses, when you're teaching the Tudor court, it's the perfect sentence that ever existed. And the other one I reference time and again is the BBC's production of Wolf Hall. In particular, the moment where you see Cromwell sat around waiting with files under his hands before he's come to everybody's attention properly, and he's sitting in like great watching chambers with petitions. And when I'm talking about that kind of culture of access, and I'm sat in the great watching chamber at Hampton Court, and I reference that scene, and I go, behind that door is the king, is Wolsey, is where you want to be. Out here is where you're waiting with a petition, hoping you're noticed. And it's such an incredible visual that if people have seen it, they know immediately what I'm talking about.
I like that kind of detail. You know, it allows you to.
What about you, Philippa? Do you have any particular films that you like or dislike from the?
Lorcan has just put about The White Princess actually in the comments, and I watched that a long time ago, and I actually really enjoyed it.
It's beautiful.
I thought it was great, and I think any historical fiction that brings people to life and doesn't get it completely wrong, but pricks the interest, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate, or even you know, like you say, if it's a good drama, it's a good story, it knits things together, brings people to life, so they're actually human beings, not names in a book or, you know, on a family tree, then I think it's really it's enjoyable for itself. And if you want to get into history, it generally is a great door into probably periods maybe you haven't looked at before. So like I've mentioned Versailles before, then I got interested in, well, okay, I love the drama, I wonder what the actual stories are behind that. And I think that's perfect.
But do you think people are I don't know the answer to this, but do you think people that they see something like that, and do you think a lot of people that they don't go any further, and that in fact that's Josephine Tay, and that's it? I've read Josephine Tay. I don't need to, and you would hope that it would encourage a questioning mind, and I wonder whether it does. I don't know.
That particular book or set of books, I think, is a little bit of an anomaly. I hope it is, because as you say, are supposed to be very good books, very well written, very entertaining, got a lot of quite good research that factually, so it's quite good historical fiction, in the sense that some historical fiction has very little history in it for a whole variety of reasons. Sometimes there just isn't much history to base them on, but some of them have been much more fully researched, and there are more source materials, so what you have to fit in to make a story, there's not naturally so many gaps. I think the thing about Josephine Tey's work is that it has been latched onto by a certain group of people who like what is in those books so much that they don't want to read. You're all nodding, and we know what you're saying.
I have no idea.
No, we're listening. We're listening to what.
I don't know.
So they don't. So we're talking mostly about The Sun in Splendor, and it's it's a novel about the life and times and events and things surrounding Richard III, and it's very popular. It's very well received, but there is I can't say this without saying it. Basically, it's a certain group of people that end there. They go, this says everything you need to know about Richard and his life, and it's beautiful work, and it is. It's all those things. It's very well written. It's very popular. Except I haven't read the whole thing, but it has that kind of stop there. So I do think those works are perhaps an anomaly. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head.
You're talking a lot in code, but I'm going to imagine is this a bit Philippa Gregory-esque as well, where people will quote you back things that supposedly Prince Arthur said to Catherine of Aragon while they were still married in Ludlow, and things like that?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a, maybe I'm a weirdo. Well, yeah. In the sense that I go to the fiction after I've read the the history. So I always get engaged by the history, and start with the so-called non-fiction book, and that's where I get so much out of that. And then I often go to the fiction a bit later. I want to see wonder how they deal with that in that way, and I wonder how many people. We always say it, don't we? That these things are gateways, and that it leads people on to further study. I wonder if it is for most people. I wonder how many people, having seen Napoleon, are now going to get Andrew Roberts' book on Napoleon, which is pretty long, actually. As I remember. But you know what I mean? I wonder whether that's it. That's their Napoleon now. Or does it matter? I don't know.
I do think that actually that we are seeing that sort of stuff happening. Like if you look at Bridgerton, there are, and particularly like Bridgerton has really invigorated things for like a TikTok generation, and they are interested by George III. They are interested by what's going on there, and they do want to. They love a bit of Caroline. They really want to know, and they want to know about Charlotte and all that kind of stuff. They want to know more and more and more.
Who's this? Who's they? The TikTok generation.
TikTok. Yeah. So lots. So
the people who get all their information in 60 seconds.
Yeah, but I think the thing about Bridgerton is that it's set in a kind of a world where there's this kind of post-racial experiment going on, but at the same time, class and sex segregation and all that kind of stuff is very, very much in evidence. And I think the way Bridgerton looks beautiful. It's a fantastic romp. In some ways, I'm a little bit sad because there is a fabulous character in the first season. He teaches the Duke, the fit Duke, to box. And I think lots of people watch that and go, oh, well, he's part, because he's also from the African diaspora. He's someone who this character is also invented for this. Actually, he is sort of, but he is based on a real life bare knuckle boxer who is fascinating. And he was enslaved. He came over here, was educated. He opened his own boxing gym, and he actually served at George IV's coronation. He was surrounded by bare knuckle boxers, and this guy was one of them. And in a way, I kind of think like Bridgerton would have been a great way to go, by the way, this guy's real. This
Yeah.
guy's a real guy. And he's and people have found him since. And I do think there's definitely a case that not everybody will look into it, but enough people will, that it's worth doing.
Well, I hope so. Yeah.
You've just reminded me of another one with that someone based on someone, Last Kingdom. Obviously, Uhtred, who was a real person who didn't last very long, whereas of course Uhtred in Last Kingdom lasts God knows how old he's supposed to be. And I think it was actually how old is Uhtred supposed to be now?
124. Yes.
Like,
someone further up in the comments, Philippa, mentioned
that's interesting. That's Bernard Cornwell, isn't it? That did that. And normally Bernard Cornwell puts a fictitious character who doesn't have a huge amount of agency. Like Sharp is a good example, isn't it? You know, and the story is around, you know, what happens to Sharp, but behind it you've got the Duke of Wellington and you've got the wars, etc. So it's a setting, isn't it? But with the Last Kingdom, it's slightly different, isn't it? You know, and with all of those, I think. Did I tell you I had a wee next to Sean Bean once in when they were filming? He was standing there, you know, learning his lines. I just stood next to him and had a wee. No, we were both in the urinals. Because I had a small part in the filming.
You say so, Julian.
In the filming. And so we stood there and I had a chat with him. He looked at me, he said, "All right." And I said, "All right."
It's very northern.
Oh my gosh. What things you learn.
But
you know what I mean about those? I do like historical fiction where it's not about Anne Boleyn, or the fiction is not about Anne Boleyn or about major characters. It's about somebody within that setting who operates, and so these things are going on in the background, and you work them in so they have some kind of influence, but they are fictitious characters.
Their styles were historically accurate, but they did look good too. But what I really liked about it is the landscape, a pre-Norman, so pre-stone built landscape. I thought that was great. I
agree. I love that sort of thing, you know, and again, I think that to a certain extent that worked well with Napoleon, you know, that other than these stupid trenches, that the general sort of look at it was pretty good.
Paige higher up had a comment saying historical TV shows are a great way to get into history. I've said it before, but Reign is what got me into history. It made me read about Mary Queen of Scots. Then I watched the Tudors. Then I read about them. And look, if we're going to Reign, I often say Reign is great fun. I often say Reign is essentially, there's a character called Mary Queen of Scots. There's a character called Francis. And there, the connection to history both begins and ends, because the costumes, while beautiful, it is like history does Pretty Little Liars. However, clearly it has the effect of inspiring people to kind of go, well, what's the truth behind this? And as with so many things about Mary Queen of Scots, because it happened also in the Mary Queen of Scots film where they meet in the weird laundry, Elizabeth ages in these films. Elizabeth ages, but Mary Queen of Scots always goes to her execution looking about 25, which is astounding to me. And I kind of feel like the story about Mary Queen of Scots that I want to hear, that I want to see, is the story of her. Let's see her post-flight from Scotland. Let's see all of those years. Let's see her imprisonment. Let's see that kind of.
You never get.
I agree. The fading and the aging, and to the point where you lift up the head, you know, and there's the wig falls off, and there's this.
She gets very ill. I've not seen
desperation
that shows how that gives you any impression that it was 19 years. Ever, it never comes across that any time has really passed. Which does a disservice.
And there we are back with Napoleon and Josephine again. It's the same thing in that, really.
However, they're very happy to have Mary I be played by people who look about 65. They're very happy to age up Mary I, and and actually I find it, and I think it's something that we sort of see. It's almost like a hangover from that Victorian fascination with the death of the virgin and the death of the innocent, and that kind of that execution of Jane Grey image, that sort of pseudo erotic of that sort of virgin sacrifice, that I think we're still seeing play out in films. That Mary Queen of Scots is in the films about her is the good one, so she must die young, which I find repellent, but also quite interesting about how there's, for me, there's that still that hangover going on.
She gets let off. She gets let off as well. A lot of, she wasn't an angel by any stretch. You know, maybe having something to do with the second husband dying. She just seems to get let off a lot.
No, because medieval, early modern, in fact, monarchs, by and large, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's so weird that I saw that piece where it talked about, there was an opinion piece asking for a Henry VIII where he's not presented as like a good guy, where somebody points out that Henry VIII was a bad guy. I'm like, what history have you been reading? Because in all of the history I read, it's very clear that he is. Because guess what? Monarchs aren't good people. They aren't good people.
But everything is a good versus bad. That's always the go-to, and it's not like that. Yeah. But
have you seen that there's going? Incidentally, talking about that, have you seen that there's going to be a 1066 series? Battle of Hastings.
This week,
yeah, literally this week. And one of the guys from Game of Thrones, Jaime Lannister, is in it, I think, and somebody else.
Yes.
So we're back to that guy again. Yeah. And I think it'd be interesting to see what they do with that and how they end it. You know, I imagine it's going to end with this arrow going through the air, and then they'll just cut
in slow motion.
Yeah, but he won't hit anybody. It will just go through the air. But that's coming out fairly soon. And they were making references to the Game of Thrones effect. They said that there is a rise in interest in this kind of stuff. But I'm given that I support King John, I'm a big supporter of William of Normandy over the Godwins, you see. So I'm going to be out on a limb again on that, aren't I? You know, we all know that Harold Godwins is going to be the tragic hero in it. You know, almost said. No, but maybe they won't. Maybe they'll look at them in a slightly different way. But you know, the Godwins, a terrible bunch of fucks, weren't they? You know, I think we've talked about this before, haven't we? I remember I butted in and said something about this. The Godwins, terrible people.
Oh, right.
Yeah, Harold Godwinson's dad, Godwin was terrible. You know, there's some we don't like. We'll blight him. Well, you've got claims on the throne. We'll kill you all outside of Guildford. You know what? It's slavery. Yeah, we'll have some of that. You know, I mean, we shall see. But I can't wait. I think it could be great. And again, as somebody that does tours to Normandy. Yeah, as somebody that goes to Normandy on tours, leads tours to Normandy and round battle and all that, it's going to be good for business, I reckon. You know?
Yeah,
you've got
I mean, that's the thing as well. Is that it's because it's not just the historical fiction. These kind of events, like the Great Gatsby events, the Bridgerton events, the way in which history is so commercial and it's so quick, and you can commercialize it so easily. It just needs something to kind of catch on, and it just goes. And I think that we are seeing a broadening in fascination with other periods. So I think the Catherine the Great TV show, that's, you know, the aesthetics of that are phenomenal. I personally found The Favourite. That's one. I think that's a brilliant film. Even though the costumes are not made of historically accurate materials, I thought it was a really interesting choice to have denim outfits.
Oh, I know, phenomenal costumes. Yeah, I saw them because I was at Hatfield and when they were filming it, and they wouldn't say what they were filming. But you know how the caravans have always got the names of the characters, not the names of the actresses. So it said Sarah and Anne, and then this trolley of wigs went past. So I thought, I know what this is going to be. You know, and it's funny how it can have an impact upon people. Peaky Blinders. You know, you started to get guys wearing those Peaky Blinder caps, didn't you? And I'm wondering whether, you know, after, if they do 1066 and all that, whether we'll have blokes with haircuts up here, you know, or whether the moustaches will come back in, you know. They could do, couldn't they? People start to look like Harold, you know. Movember could have a new lease of life, couldn't it?
Hipsters look a bit like medieval soldiers, don't they?
Yeah, I always think of them as something out of the Last Kingdom, really, or something, you know. Yeah.
You see?
Hipsters.
Hipsters are great. So here's the thing. So we see historical inaccuracies, obviously, sometimes in fiction. And as I touched on earlier, sometimes it's because there isn't much. You have more gaps to fill in than you do. So a great example would be Dan Jones's first novel, Essex Dogs. And he said himself, setting the Cressy campaign, we have nothing. We have so little that I've taken what I can get and I've built in a narrative. And that's fine. That's what we have to do. But there are some things. So people, for example, with Tudor novelists, you've got a lot more to work with in terms of what you can find out. If you then want to base a story about, when I say what we know, you know what I mean by what we know.
Yeah.
Whenever I say that we don't know or we think, it means I've read it in a book somewhere. Whenever I say we think,
we believe.
I'm a fan of the extant information or the extant evidence. I'm a big fan of the word extant.
I like that.
I love that word. That's a weasel word indeed. Or I also enjoy a by tradition. I like that too. By tradition.
History has it that.
History, yes.
Yeah.
Weasel words are fantastic, aren't they? Weasel words,
But it's interpretation of evidence anyway. I always think, you know, if we were discussing something that's happening right now, we'd all have a different interpretation on it. So the idea that history is somehow, that there is a absolute truth, correct facts and stuff, is also, I think, as dangerous as drama, and you know, at the other end, it's like you can't. There isn't that. It's all interpretation and filling in some blanks. And like Dan Jones with his book, what was interesting was he took information from diaries and accounts of people on D-Day landings because they were the same beaches. So that's how part of how he put his narrative together was using that as well. Obviously
really
different time period, but still men still being dumped on a beach, being you know,
that's an excellent book. I really enjoyed.
Still trashing car. Yeah.
So I think, you know,
Pretty Pick and Lorcan. Yes, don't worry, we are indeed a hive mind. What happens is when you decide that you want to be a historian, they do give you a membership card, and that membership card does come with a plug. And so at night, you do have to, there's just a little jot in the back of your head. You have to just plug yourself in. That's why we can't have our head shaved. We've got to keep it because we have to hide the jack-in point so that we can all hive mind together and essentially collectively decide which parts of history to hide.
Yes.
Yeah, because we're all in a big conspiracy.
I'm anxious at the moment, by the way. Do you get if you get comments? Do you get comments? Say on your phone, if you've done something, do you get an alert that that somebody's commented on something? When I put a slightly flippant comment about Richard III up, and a prominent Ricardian has just commented on it, so I'm waiting to see what I hope I've got away with it. I was only rude about Richard III's hat.
You can't do that.
But it's a special hat.
It's a holy relic. You can't.
It's not like a Tudor hat, is it? You know,
not just any old hat.
So we'll have to see what that's about in a minute, you know, or maybe they thought it was funny.
Nothing good. It will be nothing good.
It might be. You know, we'll see. Yeah. I was banging on about Al Murray. And it was very interesting. He wrote a book called Watching War Films with My Dad. And he used to sit there with his dad, and his dad would do that typical dad thing that I try not to do. You know, actually, that's a Mark IV Sherman, not a Mark VII, and that didn't come, you know, all of that stuff. But, you know, he was saying, though, that he felt he was talking about Arnhem. And okay, it was actually a non-fiction thing, but in order to make the thing run along, they just picked out certain aspects of the story, and he said that he felt a bit of a moral obligation to the other people, that had fought and died, that were just written out of the history. And it was quite interesting that that maybe that is something that one has to think about. And he found it quite difficult that they went into the sort of flashback wallop bits of the story. I mean, there were many other bits that they didn't put in, partly I think because they wouldn't have looked so good on the television. You're doing Arnhem, you want to go to that bridge, don't you, where all that bridge too far, and the fact that much of the fighting's going on quite a long way away from there, they didn't do that, and he didn't like it, and I can see why.
You've just made me think there as well with drama. I just think it's something, it's not like a problem with it, but it's something to keep in mind is there's always the main characters, and then there's the people who get slaughtered in the street, like as if there's these people that it dehumanizes actually. I was just thinking of it's Game of Thrones. I've got in my head in that, but it happens in all sorts of scenes, and I think that's worth bearing in mind. Every person is a full-on human being. And in drama, it necessitates them to be dehumanized because they then
often the people who are the main characters, such as Monarchs, for instance, they dehumanized those people as well, didn't they? So maybe it's an unintentional parallel.
Yeah, I mean, it happens in all drama, I suppose, but it's just something.
It does. Zulu's a great example. The original Zulu, where the individual characters of the British and Welsh soldiers comes out quite a lot, but the Zulus are just a kind of force, aren't they? That they're a kind of presence. They don't you don't see individual ones particularly. Their job is to sort of be shot down, really. And it's a bit of an odd dynamic that in that film when you start looking at it. It's one of my favourite films. Christmas isn't Christmas until I've had the mulled wine and seen Zulu, really. But it's just a bit of a troubling film when I think about it, really. I remember my daughter looked at the Zulus when she was about 8 or 7, and there's the Brits. She said, she looked at the Zulus, they've got no chance. She said, they've got no chance, and they didn't really.
No, just who had the guns first.
My son was so inspired by Zulu, actually, that he did actually read about that. He and his friends made a Zulu kraal in the park. At the back, they literally built a Zulu kraal. And even when it was October, they were out there in loincloths with homemade shields. They loved the Zulus. But I told them off. I said, this is cultural appropriation. You should not be doing this. Go back to Pokemon at once. I said, no, I didn't. I was glad that they did it. And but the council weren't. They thought it was a health hazard and a threat, and they pulled it all down.
Oh,
no, the council was the British Empire, you see, weren't they? Without a doubt, But no, it was phenomenal what they did, and that was because of Zulu, actually. And even tonight, having done that, James is playing football.
I think that's the thing, is that like the history and historical fiction, it can catch young and old. It can draw people into history. I read The Other Boleyn Girl approximately 400 times when I was 15.
It was your version of Stunning Splendor.
That book came with me through. I was going through a very tough time when I was 15, and that book was a way of escaping into a world I felt like I was walking through those halls, and it transported me in my mind to another time, and it was absolutely my safe space. And there is no wonder that I've ended up.
Yeah.
I went to university to study drama and English. And lo and behold, there I am. I'm before you know it, I'm doing Shakespeare. And then I'm at the Gateway. I'm just traveling back in time. And before you know it, I'm in a master's class, doing early modern literature and culture. And somebody mentions the fact that Anne Boleyn has 6 fingers, and I stood up and go, "That is the most ridiculous myth. Why on earth would you believe that?" And I'm like, "Oh, here we go. We've come full circle."
Fun sponge.
Yeah. There we are, and I've become the fun sponge.
Well, it's good to hear that, though, isn't it? That's what we hope happens, isn't it? And I'm sure it does quite a bit. I'm just a weirdo that I went about it the other way.
Somebody mentioned further up in the comments quite a while back, a really obvious one these days is Six the Musical,
which I actually now have tickets to go and see.
It's brilliant.
Philippa
Is it
was
good? I haven't been to it actually. I'd like to go.
Right.
But Hamilton. Have you been to Hamilton?
No.
No.
No, I've not been. No.
I mean, it's hard to get tickets. They are. It's been. Maybe it's easier now. But when we went up to Stratford-on-Avon, Catherine, and saw the Scottish play, Hamilton was playing.
Oh yeah.
Macbeth.
Yes.
And he was blooming good. And oh,
he was. It was a very good.
He wasn't
very
Hamilton at that time. He was the actor who played Hamilton. Should make that clear.
Yeah, I got you.
Hamilton
Yeah.
wasn't playing Macbeth.
It was a very
Like,
good Scottish play. We enjoyed it, didn't we? Not
Yes.
everyone enjoyed it. Some people got cross.
I loved
Those people were wrong.
It was for me. If anybody saw the RSC's Macbeth, there were loads of great points. But the thing that's actually stood out for me as something that I have not seen in a Macbeth before was the length of the fight sequence at the end. And stage combat is really hard. It's really tiring. And usually you probably get maybe a couple of minutes because your fight choreographer comes in for a couple of days. This fight sequence went on for 10 minutes. It was, you just think, oh my God, they're still going. They must have been exhausted. They're dragging each other across the stage and it felt really visceral. It was an incredible bit of fight choreography. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed the production greatly, but I think the fight choreographer needs a massive shout out because that was spectacular.
That's why that's great. That's why I always have a lot of time for professional wrestling, because it's not a sport, but the choreography, of what they're doing, and you watch it and you realize, oh look, they're in a kind of grip now because they've got to get their breath back, haven't they? To go again, and you can see what's being put together there, and it's very clever. It's the same thing, really, isn't it?
So it's in some ways it's harder than actually just having a fight because you are responsible for keeping yourself and somebody else and sometimes multiple other people safe. And if you take them off the ground, you've got to get them back down safely because if you trip or slip or you're not paying attention, it can go wrong really quickly, badly wrong.
One of my favourite parts, I think, of that Macbeth was very, very early on, right at the beginning, where the witches emerged.
Well, under the stage, and they had this rubberized. Okay, look, like they had this.
What are you saying, Catherine?
Roaring at me, trying to get away, and I'm like, Jesus, what the fuck's happening?
Right. Okay. It was a textural issue. What happened was the witches, you see their backs sort of come out of the stage. The stage sort of lifts up in this sort of rubberized way. And the texture of it, and I just didn't like it. And so we were very close. And so I turned to Catherine and I went, no, I don't like it. I said, what the fuck is going on? I don't like it. And it's really made me feel squicky all over. It was like there was a bowl of jelly and I felt very uncomfortable. I felt
when
unsafe.
Small children are scared and they crawl up you to get away. It was kind of like that.
So it kind of worked. Is it just the rubber? Do you just don't like rubber, or was it the scene?
It was disturbing. They were very close, and I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't, because you didn't know the stage. It wasn't clear. The stage looked like it was solid, and they came out of it, and they were moving in like a really sort of uncanny way. And I just and they had like their costume was sort of made out of bits of wig, so you weren't sure what was head and what was arse, and the whole thing was just they were very physically upsetting, but that's what they're supposed to be. It was fabulous, but they were physically upsetting.
Pretty big as but it's bad when Dr.
So are you going to end this one? Yeah, you're going to end this with when. Are you going to end this with when shall we three meet again? You could do that. It's quite a nice little end, couldn't you?
Yes, we should. We should learn that bit of script.
Let's do that.
Fillet of a fenny snake in the cauldron boiling. But I was second witch in the school play of Macbeth. That was one. Yeah, and I remember my grandmother, who was French and loud, saying, "But you could hear her in the audience. He hasn't got any shoes on," she said. I could hear her. No rubber there. There was no rubber involved. I
No
can tell
rubber
you.
involved. Probably for the best. Right. Well, we're up to an hour and 10 minutes, so we probably should wrap it up because I know. Well, thank you, Julian, for spending your Wednesday evening with us.
Yeah, thank
It's
you.
been fun. It's always nice. I sometimes, you know, this like that, like some kind of peeping Tom. I occasionally tune in, don't try and watch a bit, see what you're up to, you know, and then sneak away to go and watch I'm a Celebrity or whatever, you know. But it's been fun to be here, you know.
We've loved having you.
Yes,
Yes,
thank you.
always. And everyone now will be rushing off to watch Napoleon.
You've got to go and see Napoleon. You know, it doesn't matter. You know, you don't expect brilliant acting. You know, they could only do with the script they had. So you know, they did that. They played it as well as they could. You know, but it's a joy. And also, there's a scene which is straight out of Monty Python and the Holy Grail with British sentries shouting at goats. That's good to see as well. It's a very important aspect of it. Yeah. But no, everybody go and watch it. Go and watch it because it's interesting. It'd be lovely to know what people thought of it because, you know, I'm hampered by the fact I kind of know about it, I suppose.
Yeah, see, I don't.
But I would have gone with it. I would have. I mean, I'm going back, but I would have gone with it more. I think if it was a bit less clunky, the actual narrative itself.
But I only want to see it if I can go with you. I don't want to see it on my own.
It'll be fun. Well,
What
actually, on that note,
I can't stop. I say things.
I was saying, but you're not quiet, are you?
I can't be quiet. I remember when who is it that gets killed? Oh, well, it's Sean Bean again, isn't it? In you know this in The Hobbit. No, in Lord of the Rings, and he Boromir, isn't it? And he's hit by these arrows, you know. And then I shouted out 180, and my kids were so embarrassed. They honestly, you can imagine what they thought about
that. Julian,
anyway.
If people can't, obviously we can't have all of our audience come and watch Napoleon with you because I think the cinema will be full, but they can join you on your tours. Where can they find your tours? Promote yourself. Blog your
right, but this is something new that I've got a website.
You have.
I've got a website. Yeah, which my son did for me actually about a week ago. Yeah. And it's all right. But its main purpose actually is to just say what tours I do. And unbelievably, it's www.julianhumphries.com. You wouldn't believe it, would you?
All one word.
Genius.
Yeah. All one word.
And notice the Humphries. There's no E in it.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
But it's pretty po-faced. Yeah, it's pretty serious. The website. There's no swearing or innuendo in it.
But you know, the thing is, they now know what they're getting. They can book the serious tour and get the swearing when they get there, so they know.
Yeah, they do. That was the other thing I forgot. Oh no, that's another thing. That was House of Bernarda Alba, where I've never heard so many F words in a play. But that's another story.
In real life,
because my wife is at the National, darling. My wife is at the National in the House of Bernarda Alba, which is a darling, yes, with Harriet Walter and Cass, and what a tough watch that is, I can tell you. But I've never heard so many F words in that play, and given that she's supposed to be a sort of puritanical mistress of the house, God, if we'd spoken like that in front of my mum, there would have been hell to pay. But so that's the plug from my wife in the House of Bernarda Alba at the National, darling.
Do you want to plug your son as well? He does music.
Yeah,
let's do the whole family. What about the son?
Yeah, yes. Well, the James Humphrys Music. So there you look, jameshumphrysmusic.com.
So essentially,
and Sarah Humphries, environmentalist. Aim high, AIMHI.com.
Well,
she lives in Lancaster, which is great. I love Lancaster. You know,
we've plugged the entire Humphreys clan.
Yeah, and then the only other thing is my cat, but that's not around at the moment. But
I love your cat. Your cat's excellent.
Minty the cat. Yes.
Yes.
Fabulous.
Anyway, it's getting self-indulgent, isn't it? Thank you for having me. It's been always a laugh, isn't it?
Oh, of course.
Brilliant.
Thank you. What do we need to share, ladies? What do we need to
Yes.
share? We need to do our stuff. We need to do our stuff now, Julian. What do we need to
Okay,
share?
sorry. Philippa, what's happening next week?
Well, next week we are going to come out with our pokey sticks because we've got Nathan on. So we might get there might be some discussion about some news about
Some princes from
in a
somewhere.
tower. Oh, Julian's left us.
Julian's had enough.
Sharpen your pokey sticks for next week.
Yes.
Sharpen them up just in case you need them. He's gone.
Absolutely gone.
I think he was on his phone and he took the plug out.
He
Right.
might come back.
So we've got Nathan next week. Hello, here we go. We can. Hello. We also have, if you want to support us, then we do have a place on Buy Me a Coffee where you can buy us actually Winnebagos. It is www.buymeacoffee.com/had podcast. That is also a place where you can find out about coming and being a close friend over on the Instagram. We do post depraved things in our stories over there. So if you want to see what nonsense we are mostly texting to each other, you can come and do that too. We also
this week.
Yes, there have been some panty decorations. We have a Substack as well. That is at.
Bear with me, caller.
I'm waiting.
Julian, have you ever driven a Winnebago? There it is.
It is historyafterdarkhub.substack.com. We also, if you go to the links in our bio, etc., you will find places where we have our merch, including the famous Timmy is a problem mug. We do also have No Feet for Free on the internet sliders. We have our History After Dark t-shirts, and this is a long sleeve one. All good things like that. So come and see what's going on.
Yep.
Anything else?
Julian, have you ever driven a Winnebago?
No.
Do you want to come on holiday with us, Julian?
Well,
Come on holiday.
well, I'm the driver, am I? I used to drive the Winnebago. And
well, we'll be busy in the back.
Where's the Winnebago going? Where's it going? Where are you going
Wherever
to with it?
Waterloo?
Yeah.
Do you want to come on holiday?
A cucumber farm. And then a tea factory.
A cucumber farm and a tea factory.
Yeah. Whatever most upsets Catherine is where it's going. That's what's happening.
And we have to drive at
we're
night
assholes
while she's trying to sleep.
Well, I won't be sleeping, will I? If you're driving.
We will be.
C. McG, Thunder Bay is going to be one of them. We're going to Thunder Bay.
Julian, do you drink tea? What do you think about a British person who does not like wet leaves? Do you like tea?
Exactly.
Tea?
Right.
Yes.
No, don't forget that I'm a strange melange of Turkish, Italian, French, and a bit of British. So consequently, I have a lot of coffee. I have a lot of coffee. Tea doesn't do it for me. I'm a coffee man.
Well,
he didn't say he didn't like tea, though.
It was all going so well, wasn't it? Why are you tea people? Who's
no, not necessarily. It's just bizarre that someone doesn't like tea, like at all.
Who doesn't like it?
Catherine.
Julian buys me surprise hot chocolate. It's not a surprise because I know it's hot chocolate, but it's still surprise hot chocolate at Bosworth.
Make it tea next time. That will be a surprise.
No, tea's all right. Tea, isn't it? I think it's quite nice. It's thinner, isn't it, than coffee? It's got a thinness to it. I always think that
yeah,
you can
drink it in the morning.
Coffee's a bit thicker
in the afternoon.
Yes.
God, I was when I was finishing the Al Murray script. I went to a Turkish cafe, which is just down in town. Called it's run by a Turkish journalist that had to leave due to sort of government pressure, and she set up this cafe. And I had 3 of her Turkish lattes in 2 hours in the afternoon.
You were right,
and I couldn't work out when I got home why I was all over the place. You know, I thought my head was going to explode, but I'd go like this. And basically, what I'd done was I had 6 double Turkish espressos. Absolutely, yeah. So I didn't have any more coffee after that for a while. It was terrible. I couldn't work out what was going on. Yeah. It's a displacement activity for me. Do you all do that when I'm writing? I've got to have a hot drink.
Oh yeah,
yes.
big time.
And even now, I've been having a coffee. You know, nervous. You know,
I'm gonna have a hot chocolate.
You'll sleep well tonight.
I have a velvetizer.
I can't get to sleep without coffee. I'm so addicted.
You can't get to sleep without
Yeah.
it.
No, I'm so addicted to
I
coffee.
just
If I
think
haven't had a
about
coffee at bedtime, I'm getting all sort of twitchy. So I have to have one.
Oh, Julian, that's bad. And do you actually have coffee, or do you have what I call brown?
Brown.
Yeah.
No, I have coffee. I like a nice cafetiere with a strong plunger on it. The act of plunging is also part of it. You know.
We're gonna get on well.
That sounded so filthy.
Nice strong plunge
Yeah, good plunge.
of an evening. That's what you need. Helps you go to sleep.
Yes, and then and the grind, of course, the coffee grinds after the plunge.
Yeah. They're good for your garden. Right, I suppose we
Problem with
should.
the plunging though is there's a lot of mess to clear up afterwards before
There
you
is.
Right, stop. Okay.
Yes, there is.
Before you can go again.
Yeah. Very difficult to get it off your trousers on the front if it gets there.
On that note, shall I, before we have to yeet this into the sun, because we're starting to dance the dance, we're starting to dance the sword dance towards vulgarity. Shall I count us out?
I love how Kat says like that, like it's never hurt.
Yes.
Never me.
And I should say, if any of my family are watching this, I apologise. Sometimes my son watches some of these things. I'm very sorry, Jim, if you're watching. You know,
You're giving him a plug.
It's not his fault.
he's got a
Been
plug.
led
Yeah.
astray.
Yeah.
It's not your dad's fault. He has been led astray. We are to blame, mostly Catherine, but also us too.
Hang on. I've seen Julian in other settings. That sounds wrong.
I'm not sure.
He's always this Julian.
Right.
Let's get out of this now. I'm gonna let's get out of it. I've got some plunging to do.
Right. Julian, thank you so much for joining us.
No, it's lovely to see you guys again. You know, keep up the good work. I'm gonna buy some merch actually, and anybody watching, I think they should do likewise.
Thank you. Also, thank you to everybody who's watching live. If you're watching on the playback, thank you as well. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, select all in the drop down that will appear so that YouTube will allegedly tell you when we have next uploaded. We will see you all next week for more fun, frolics, and possibly controversy. I'm going to count us out now. That's 3, 2, 1. Bye.